Hello and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast. So the first of our four Divisional Round game preview episodes, and I think the first one, may as well start with the best one. It's Bills against Chiefs. I think the most recent, NFL rivalry you could say. A game which, for me personally, is the best I've ever watched a couple of years ago in the same round. So it should be a cracker, and I am, as ever, your host, Andy Davies. And this week, I'm joined by two guests, one from each side. First of all, in the red corner, with us today, returning to the show, is Chiefs fan David Figgins. David, how are you?
I'm all right. Yeah. I'm a little bit more buoyed by the performance last week.
Thanks for that.
So yeah, I'm doing all right. Thanks.
Great stuff. And in the blue corner, all the way from Buffalo, is our returning Bills fan, David Kaprosch. David, how are you?
We're good. We're good. Thanks for having me. Can't wait.
Yeah, it should be a cracker. Those who are Bills fans, of course, do check out Dave's Hit the Showers Facebook page. Some great Bills content on there. Do check it out, and I will put the link in the bio for this episode. So, as I said before, we are here for the Bills against the Chiefs. Of course, the Chiefs went through after a win, which I don't want to talk about really, but a win against the Dolphins, and the Bills went through after a rearranged game on Monday Night Football as they took on the Steelers and beat them fairly convincingly. David, our Chiefs, David, over to you first. What was your take on the game in the wildcard round against the Dolphins?
It was the most comfortable I've been watching the Chiefs for a while. For probably this season. I think that the defense is incredible this season. It's quite easily, quite comfortably the best defense that Patrick Mahomes has had in the 6 years that he's been a starter. And I think that yeah, there wasn't a point in the game, even when Miami got back into it. There wasn't a point in the game where you're thinking Miami are posing a major threat here. I mean, the little devil on my shoulder was whispering in my ear every now and again, and particularly with the Chiefs' older playoff history, that was a little bit in there. But I think overall, it's definitely the most comfortable I've been watching more or less any game this season.
Yeah, I think once again it proves that who really cares how you do in the first 4 weeks or even the first 10 weeks, as the Bills have proved recently. They're in the second seed in the AFC. They're in the divisional round, and they were 6-6 at one point this year. Whereas teams like ourselves, who were 5-1, 6-1, beat Denver by 50 points, scored 70 on them. First round of the playoffs, we crumble under the pressure and lose. So I think what the Chiefs have, but I think both these teams have really proved this season is that, and I think the Chiefs did a couple of years ago as well, where they made the AFC title game, is really the regular season is just almost like a preseason for them. As long as you get into the playoffs, that really doesn't matter. Obviously, seeding helps a little bit, but in the end of the day, um, you know, if you can just get in, that's the most important thing because anything can happen. And if you're hitting form at the right time, the final 4 weeks of the season, then you got one of the best chances of winning it. Whereas if you go into playoffs, like the Eagles did or like we did, where you lose quite a few of your most recent games, then you're probably going to go out first round. We saw it with the Cardinals a few years ago. We saw it with the Steelers a few years ago as well. I think this proves again that really it's how you do in the final 5 weeks that really makes all the difference. But for you, of course, David, you were there at Arrowhead with the famous 13-second game. For me personally, the best I've ever watched in my life, which I know brings you a lot of pain. I'm speaking to you about it in Buffalo in October, but how good is it for you the fact that it's the first time you actually be able to host the Chiefs in the playoffs?
It's been this seems like forever, a long time coming, finally getting them in our building. Haven't been to the last four games there outside of the AFC Championship game. Yeah, it's going to be a treat unlike no other. It's going to bring back the 90s atmosphere, I believe, in that building, which, I mean, that goes without saying back then. But yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I mean, two good teams. I mean, I love Andy Reid. I loved him when he was in Philly. And I mean, what can you say about Pat Mahomes that nobody hasn't said yet? I mean, classic quarterbacks, a great atmosphere. Again, finally back in Buffalo, and this should go down as advertised. This game, I think it won't disappoint for sure.
I think as a neutral, I certainly obviously, I think we all know who I'll be cheering on a little bit more than the other, but I think it should be a crack of a game. I don't think it quite live up to that game in 2021 season, but I think we'll get a good game. And I think that for Mahomes, it's he's already on 12 wins, which is amazing. And if he makes a Super Bowl, he could tie for third place of all time playoff wins for quarterback. But this will be his first game that isn't a Super Bowl in the playoffs where he plays it on the road. I mean, to have your first 6 years of your career starting, to have 5 straight home games in the AFC title game and not yet actually play a road game in the divisional round or the wild card round or the title game is such an amazing stat. So it's Mahomes' first time doing it. Does that worry you at all? The fact that he is going to be doing something that he's not done before, playing in Buffalo in the playoffs, but also in Buffalo as well, and also doing it as a road team rather than in Arrowhead.
It's amazing that you just, everything you just said, that he has not played a road game in the playoffs since he was been a Chief. I mean, that alone, I mean, even Brady can't even say that. And we all know how good his career was. But yeah, I mean, he was here in 2020 in the regular season with no fans and, in a steady rain. And I mean, that sucked just watching that on TV that day. But fast forward to, the playoffs of this year. I don't know, nothing else that I haven't already said. It should set up for just a fantastic game. And to echo Dave's comments, yeah, the Chiefs defense definitely much. I mean, they've always had a good defense, but I think this year, I wouldn't say it's carried the team with the struggles they may have had a little bit offensively, but yeah, it's definitely going to be a challenge for the Bills off.
Yeah, and I think that it's really I think two of the three best quarterbacks in the league. I think I'd have Allen probably third and Mahomes one. And I think it's two electric teams. And I think that, I think Diggs is maybe not been the same player recent times, but you still got Khalil Shakir, you still got Gabe Davis, who nicknamed Big Game Davis for a reason. And you've got Dawson Knox and Kincaid, and Kincaid has actually been really good in recent weeks. Remember, we saw him against Buccaneers. What we week 10, wherever it was in October. We saw him then, and you could see it sort of then developing. You can see the kind of player he's going to be. And I think since that game we watched together, he's taken his game to a whole new level. So I think to have that and have obviously the likes of Travis Kelce there, two great defenses, especially against the pass. Two great defensive lines. I think it's going to be a really good game. I was going to ask Davis something, but he seems to have disappeared. Now, of course, one thing I want to touch on with you, David, was the fact that we talked about it in the Cowboys episode with our Cowboys Packers preview, where I think what ended up being the case for the Cowboys was, again, obviously they were outplayed in many departments, but I think one thing that Dallas had, I think Buffalo has to a certain extent, is getting over the hump and getting over that mental block. And I think that the Cowboys have this issue, the pressure of being America's team, have not made an NFC title game for 20 odd years. And it seemingly they thought it could be their year to make that game and play probably the Niners. But for you, does that almost, with the way it's gone in recent years, you've got the 32nd game, you've got the loss against the Bengals, you've got the loss against the Chiefs in a title game a few years ago, and I'm going to mention it again. Get your bingos card out. 4 Super Bowl losses in a row. I mean, there's a big mental block with this team. A team that's never won a Super Bowl before. Do you think, on current form, I think both teams are fairly even, but do you think that could almost be the thing that hurts you more than anything else? The fact that it is that mental block, as well as being also playing into Chiefs, who have beat you guys twice in the last 4 years in this sort of stage of the playoffs, or this sort of at this point. So for you, does that worry you? In fact, is that a concern for you? The fact that this team hasn't yet, certainly in the McDermott Allen era, gotten over that hump and made a Super Bowl or made a second title game?
I think to touch on the past with the 4 Super Bowl losses, I think that's so far in the rear view. I think for them right now is exercising those demons of those 2 playoff losses to that team. Obviously 13 seconds compared to last season at this time. I think they're in a total different mindset. You could see it, you could hear it, pregame, postgame, during the week, after practices. They are just in a different mindset. And I think defensively, as much as they're beat up right now, and I am not using that as an excuse, because since that Philly game. McDermott has drawn up some defensive schemes to keep this team, you know, in games, and offensively right now they're, we get Davis back on Sunday, which looks like it's going to happen. I think they're the healthiest right now at this point in the year. I think in the last three. So if Kansas City wants to get into another shootout, right now early forecast for Sunday out here, it's going to be in the low 20s, a dry track, no wind and no snow. So kind of like what you saw for the Pittsburgh game. As long as that track is dry and nothing's falling from the sky, I expect that this game in the upper 20s, maybe even in low 30s as a score. So,
And of course, you mentioned that of course, you live in Buffalo and you were at the game, as you always are for Bills games. You were at Orchard Park, and obviously the whole talk was around the game, the fact that the game got moved from Saturday, it's from Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. UK time to Monday. Just how for those who haven't been to Buffalo, or those who have lived under a rock with NFL fans, how would you describe what that someone who actually lived in the area when it was happening? How would you describe the weather, and how bad was it, or how bad still is it?
well, not to play meteorologist, but having grown up here my whole life, I'll do a quick analysis of this. You get a wide open Lake Erie waters until it freezes. You get the cold air, it picks up that moisture, and that's what the word lake effect comes in, and it snows, and the snow band will just literally go, like right now it's up north of the city and it's supposed to move back down. So it just kind of, it's like a little thin band, and it just kind of oscillates from north and south when it sets up. And right now it's up in the north towns up towards Niagara Falls, and later this afternoon it's supposed to swing back through towards the city and back towards Orchard Park in Hamburg, where the stadium sits. Yeah, they were not playing a game. That Pittsburgh game that was scheduled on Sunday, that wasn't happening. It was so bad. Not so much where I was, because Sunday afternoon it wasn't really snowing until Sunday night. But down there, and you've been here. I'm 15 minutes northwest of the stadium, and it's pretty close. And that's insane. Those snow bands set up, and they're not wide. They're probably 15 to 20 maybe miles wide, and they go almost the full length of the lake. And once that sets up, if there's no oscillation of that band, it'll just sit there and just thump and thump. I mean, you look in 3 to 4 inches an hour, whatever that is in metric that I learned in school. It's a lot of snow in a short period of time, and like I said, and it was windy over the weekend, and you throw the winds mixed in with that many inches of snow falling in an hour. Yeah, it was a mess down there. And I got down there Sunday or late Monday morning, and the sun was out, the roads were clean. We were ready for football.
I mean, I will say, having experienced it with you, that is by far the best ever tailgate I've ever experienced. That was some day, and yeah, I'm looking forward to certainly when the Bills Stadium is newly one built. I can't wait to watch Bills Dolphins there, because I think that would be a hell of a show.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what do you think? We'll touch on the Dolphins for a second. What do you think?
No, I'd rather not. This is a cheese Bills episode, but yeah, no, I think I'm pretty sure I said to you my thoughts on it the other day. I mean, I've said it before. Pretty much this podcast has been a thing. What 2021 season it was, or was it 2021 the two? But either way, it was I said it a while too. I think that for a while, I think he's definitely improved, and I think that the coaching's improved. But I think there's so much flaws in both those areas. Daniel just appears to every big game just completely abandon the run. Tua just constantly makes mistakes, or throws double coverage time after time again. Doesn't seem to have that sort of. I think Josh Allen has his mistakes. He's very turnover friendly, but he can also win you a game in a 2-minute drill. Fourth quarter, you're down by 6. You would almost bet your mortgage on him doing that for you. Whereas I don't think people like certainly the Rams version of Goff and Tua at the moment just don't, and that I think Dak is in that same category now. Just don't seem to have that ability to do it when the chips down. And I think when you're winning games, they look great, and when you're at home and you're perfect weather, you look great. But I think when the chips are down, you're not in your normal surroundings. It can often He can often do that. And talking of new surroundings, I mean, we talked about before our Chiefs version of David with our Bills, David. The fact that Mahomes has yet to play a road game in the playoffs that isn't a Super Bowl. So for you, Chiefs, David, how are you feeling about that? The fact that he's doing something he hasn't done before, and do you think that could even be a factor? Or we can talk about the drop pass all we like, but do you think that that could be an issue? The fact that Mahomes hasn't yet done it, apart from Super Bowl, not an Arrowhead in the playoffs.
If I'm being honest, I think it could go the other way, in the sense that Mahomes, particularly in the playoffs, hasn't had many games where the Chiefs have been the underdog, or the perceived underdog, as it were. And Mahomes, as we've seen countless times, will use literally anything to try and motivate himself, like Jordan-esque type motivation techniques. Like when he came fourth in the NFL Top 100, and he did the tweet with the little notepad and pen, and then he won MVP the season after. And just little things like that, where he's just a born winner. He's just a winner in his DNA. And I think that he in particular will turn that. But I think the defense as well, led by the CEO of Sack Nation, Chris Jones, will use that to their advantage. I think it's a little bit different in the sense that Miami, for instance, were going from some pretty lovely temperatures in Miami to come into freezing cold Kansas City, whereas Kansas City go into Buffalo, albeit with some inclement weather conditions there, it is not too dissimilar. That said, if there's any team that I didn't want to face in the playoffs, it would have been Buffalo in the AFC. I genuinely would have rather faced the Ravens than Buffalo on this side, because again, Josh Allen, born winner. He will do anything to motivate himself to get his team across the line. But I think in terms of historic matchups, it will probably be a little bit more. It'll be a little bit different, because I think it's been a bit of a gun show in previous encounters, and I don't think that will be the case, particularly with the cold weather. I think defenses will have a lot to say when it comes to the game. So yeah, I'm sort of, I flip and flap. I don't know if I've been on this podcast a couple of times now, and I kind of do that where I have the angel and the devil on either side. That one of them saying, "Oh yeah, the Chiefs will do really really well," and then the other side of going, "Well, remember the Steelers playoff game where you lost without kicking it, without the Steelers scoring a touchdown, or the game where the Colts came back with the highest comeback ever." But yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting because it'll be interesting to see how Mahomes does on a road game, and not just Mahomes. Most of these players will have not played a road game for the Chiefs in the playoffs. I can't think of any other than maybe Kelsey.
Maybe Valdez-Scantling with the Packers, maybe, or
I'm just thinking with the Chiefs in particular. So the road game, a road game with the Chiefs, I think that there's only really anybody that predates Mahomes is probably Kelsey, and then that's it. And I can't think of whether he played a road game in the playoffs or not. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with that, having to go in there, having the crowd, which is obviously one of the best in the NFL, and having to deal with the pressure of going on a road game in the playoffs. Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Yeah, and I think that it's you said completely right there. It's not as if it's someone going from hot conditions to cold or vice versa. It's someone going from somewhere cold to somewhere equally as cold. So it's I think interesting with him. And I think that I think we all know it's going to happen at some point. I think it was inevitable. He couldn't have kept all these years playing games at home, and he could even have two road games if the Ravens beat the Texans and the Chiefs do beat the Bills. Then that's two games in a row. But I think I think I think the fact that he can go into a Super Bowl, win the AFC, and become the third most playoff wins for a quarterback is, I think, just speaks volume as to how good his career's been so far. And I think he's already a top five QB. And I think that if he wins the Super Bowl again this year, I think he goes into probably top three territory. I think Montana and Brady have got a lot more higher mountain to climb, but I think certainly he'll probably overtake maybe Manning and Elway and people like that. So I think, it's certainly for his legacy, he'll want to try and do that. But of course, he needs to be helped by his receivers, and that's been probably your one weakness this year, which in years gone by maybe wasn't the case when you had Hill and Kelsey both firing. But been a lot of drop passes in this season, particularly, and Kelsey, has looked slightly on the decline. I know he had pretty much 1,000 yards this year once again, but or just under 16 yards under, but he's 34 now. He is showing some decline, the signs of decline, but I think otherwise, Valdez Scantling has been dropping some passes. Kadarius Toney, Rashee Rice has been great, but does that worry you, the fact that the receiver help just hasn't been what it has been for Mahomes in recent years? And yes, you've made the playoffs, and yes, you've beaten the Dolphins, but those points this year, the Raiders game, they're not a good team, and you had problems against them. And do you think is that maybe the biggest worry of you? Because the defense, we mentioned it just then, the defense is playing excellent and getting better every week, and it was great against the Dolphins last week. Shut them out in all three of the four quarters. So does that one part of the game potentially worry you? The fact that it's basically Kelsey or no one.
I think Rashee Rice proved on the weekend that he's a legit contender to be a number one wide receiver, and I think throughout the season they've been trying to figure out, because they've been trying to do wide receiver by committee, and I think Mahomes is finally, because I thought it would happen a lot earlier, because again with Mahomes you just think that he's naturally going to figure things out. I think that he's figured out where he feels safer to throw to. So Watson is a more safer throw than, say, Kadarius Toney. MVS rarely features. McCall Hardman, I'm still not a fan of McCall Hardman, but Mahomes trusts him, although saying that he dropped a couple of passes on the weekend. But I think if you've got Rashee Rice, and then obviously I would argue that Kelsey's probably had a downturn season due to coverage rather than him maybe showing signs of aging. He has had a couple of drop passes, but I think that's just been across the board. And I think it's more of a worry for other receivers such as MVS and Toney than it is for particularly for Kelsey. But I think the one thing that has certainly helped in recent weeks is the emergence of, I'd say, well, you can say emergence, but the dominance of Isaiah Pacheco at running back. And I think that certainly helps, particularly with play action, that it's helped create a little bit of space for some of the receivers, particularly in the slot. And I like the fact that Pacheco's such an angry runner. I mean, you wouldn't, if you were watching a game and watching some of Pacheco's highlights, you wouldn't have realised that it was absolutely freezing, because he was just knocking people over and running as angry as he has been since we picked him up in the 7th round last season. So I'm not as worried about the receivers as I was, because I think Mahomes, particularly in the playoffs when it's crunch time and he needs to do it, figures things out.
Yeah, and I think that he, we mentioned before about quarterbacks that don't have that big game. You look Tua, Dak, but I think I can imagine. I think both of you, but particularly yourself, and I think Texans fans will be in that same category now. And I think Packers fans over the years with Favre, then Rodgers, you just go. It must be nice to go into games and just have that safety net, knowing your quarterback can just win you games like that. And I think that I'm still waiting for that to happen with myself, but it must be so nice if you both to have that quarterback where that even if things aren't going well, they could just flick the switch on and turn it around. I think that's something that, I think Josh Allen probably hasn't yet, like Mahomes, had these big playoff moments. But I think this year is his chance. I think if you can beat the Chiefs, make an AFC game, I think that will. But I think if he loses it again, it'll just be even more of a talking point about him not beating the Chiefs. But I think if he can beat the Chiefs, which he hasn't done yet in the postseason, I think that's a big, big game for his legacy. And I think that the Ravens are a similar thing. They haven't yet done it in the playoffs either. I think both teams, will be equal. I think particularly Ravens and Bills fans after their most recent playoff heartbreak in the last 3-4 years. They'll be both Lamar Jackson and Allen going to be really keen to show that they can do it. And I think it's going to be really interesting if Allen does beat Mahomes. And that's where we're going to end the podcast now with our predictions. So, Bills, David, what's the score going to be?
Oh, goodness. I hate it.
And of course, who's going to
win? Yeah, obviously I'm picking the Bills. Again, like I said earlier, weather should not be a factor. I look for, we could see another divisional game from 2 seasons ago. It could be 35-31 Buffalo. Bills scored 31 in that weather last week, and it's going to be just a tad warmer. Not that that matters for this Sunday compared to Monday afternoon here, but yeah, I think it's just going to be all hands on deck. Pull out the pistols and let's fire. And like I said, I'm thinking 35-31 Bills.
Well, as you say, David, buckle up.
Now with the cold weather, as I say, layer up and buckle up, because it's going to be a wild one for both teams. I literally, I can't wait. I've been waiting for this matchup to come to Buffalo for a long time, and it's here, and I can't wait.
It's going to be so good. Chiefs, David, for your winner and score prediction.
I am a little bit more reserved. I think it'll be a little bit of a quieter game, particularly with the weather. I think it'll be a reverse of the game that happened in January. I think it'll be 2017, but I think it'll be to the Chiefs.
Okay. Well, as the neutral, I have probably the most interesting decision to make. I've been tossing and turning. I've been planning this podcast for a few days now. I've been tossing and turning as to who I think is going to win. I think there's definitely reasons for both. I think Mahomes has that so far. Unlike Allen, the playoff resume, but the Bills are at home, and that makes a huge difference. And I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go for the home team. So I'm going to go for the Bills to win, and I'm going to go for I've been saying the Chiefs all year to win the AFC game, but I just have a feeling the Bills might do it. So I'm going to go for a 27-20 win for the Bills, but I still, my pick so it's the Chiefs to win it, but I just have a feeling in this one game I think they could beat the Chiefs, and the fact that at home could be the defining factor. But that is where we'll end the podcast for today. So once again, huge thank you to both Davids for coming on today.
No problem.
Thank you for having us, David. Good luck to your Chiefs.
Yeah, good luck to the Bills. And for what it's worth, I think if the Bills do come out on top, I think they'll win the whole thing.
Do you reckon? Interesting.
Yeah.
I still think the 49ers for me are even if the Ravens win the AFC, I still think the Niners win it. I think they're just pound the best team, one of the best coaches in the playoffs at the moment in the league in general. I just think the Niners have got overall. I think for me, I think it's their time. I think they're going to do it. But the AFC, I think it's so wide open. I think NFC for me, I think it's like for me, Niners are they're way clear of the Lions for me. They're way clear of Packers, way clear of the fourth team's not coming now. But I think the AFC is so well. I can see the Bills winning. I can see the Chiefs winning it. I can see Stroud winning with the Texans. So I think and Ravens obviously probably got now a 2-time MVP as their quarterback. So the AFC is so open, and I think that really I could make a case for all 4 teams winning the AFC.
Yeah, I would throw with the AFC. I could see out of 5 teams, 3 being AFC, Chiefs, the three we mentioned, Chiefs, Ravens, Bills, and 49ers. I think one of those 4 I could see winning the whole thing.
I think we got to look at. Question I thought of this now actually is, I think we all think the Niners can make it, but I think who's the one team you think could do it? Because I think personally, I think the Packers are more likely to make it than the Lions. Personally, I think that they have to beat the Niners on this weekend coming up. But I think the team they've got, the young core they've got, and receivers and quarterback, I think this team for me, I think is a team that really no one's really taken seriously. I don't think at the moment. So I think the Niners will be clear, but I think the Packers, I wouldn't be shocked, especially if they beat the Niners. I can see them beating the Lions, and I can see them beating the literally the fourth team. Literally, who's the fourth team in the NFC? My mind's gone blank. Buccaneers? Yeah, I can see the Packers beating Buccaneers and the Lions. I think if they could beat the Niners, I wouldn't be shocked if they're a team in the Super Bowl.
Wow.
But that's what ended for today. This has been the Across the Pod podcast, our Bills Chiefs Divisional Round game preview. I've been your host, Andy Davies. This has been up to David, and we will see you guys for our next game preview.